Hello and welcome to this chess strategy video entitled Control the Center, which is very important throughout a game of chess. If we look at this game, I played in a local chess club against Vinny. I had the white pieces. So we can see here in this, overview of the game where white just gets an advantage and it just gets bigger and bigger, throughout the game. So this advantage occurred because I was able to control the center of the board, and we'll talk about why that's so important here in this game. And it looks like I played at 89.6 versus their 77.3. And we didn't have any brilliant or great moves. Two inaccuracies versus his one, and then he had three mistakes. So let's take a look at this. So I began here. Let me put on the analysis. I played e4. So right away I'm trying to control the center by placing this pawn in the center, which covers the important d5 square. And some people think, well, to control the center, how do I do that? Should I just place pieces in the center? That is a good strategy, but you have to remember that this pawn doesn't actually control the square that it's on, but it does control f5 and d5, and it can also block a central pawn of black's. So the game continues with this, g6. So another way to control the center is by fianchettoing a bishop here to g7, which aims down through the long diagonal through the center. So this is a different way to control the center. You can either put your pawns in the middle or attack the center with the bishop like this. So I just go ahead and control even more of the center by placing my two pawns in the center, which is a good strategy to control all these squares in the center. And so my opponent continues by attacking with his bishop, but my queen is protecting at the moment, protecting this d4 pawn. So I just continue by developing another pawn here. So, this is a book move. This is called the modern defense, the three pawns attack. So the reason I did this was to control e5 even more here. And now I can just push my knight up here behind the pawn. You do have to be careful if you push too many pawns without moving pieces, because then you don't have your pieces developed yet to fortify these pawns in the center. And this might have weakened my king side a little bit. So another way to play this would have been to just start developing the knights to c3 and f3. But I put all my pawns in the center, and at least my opponent is fighting for control of the center now. So he's targeting a more valuable central d4 pawn with this less valuable c pawn. So if I go ahead and capture that, he could just check me with his queen and then recapture the pawn. So I just fortify with another pawn here. So c3. Now if he captures, I'll recapture and keep this valuable central d4 pawn. So the game continues with a capture. So he does capture, I recapture, keeping my strong central pawn formation. And now he adds pressure to that pawn with the bishop and the queen. But, the computer says this is a good move, but not the best move. The computer actually wants knight to h5 here, which may slow down a attack against this fianchettoed position. But it also allows the knight to move off to the side. If the knight moved here to f6, I could just push forward and attack it. But if he moved here to knight to h6, then he would be ready to just go ahead and castle. All right, so in the game, he piles up on this d4 pawn. So I just develop a piece and protect it. So another way to control the center is with these knights. The knights are almost always well placed on knight to f3 and knight to c3 here, where you get the knights out, move them towards the center, and they cover valuable squares in the center. So especially when you're trying to control the center of the chessboard, these four squares in the middle, the two that these pawns are on and the other two in front of them, are some of the most valuable real estate in the chessboard. The only other place that might be more important is the area around the king, especially if the king comes under attack. So why is it good to control the center of the board? Well, if you control the center of the board and place your pieces in the center, control the center, you'll be able to move your pieces more easily through the center. And from the center of the board, the pieces can get anywhere else on the chessboard the quickest way possible. So imagine if there's an attack going on the king side and all your pieces are over on the queen side and black is controlling the center. It's going to be a lot harder to get your pieces moved across the board over to where the action is on the king side. All right, so continuing on, my opponent plays knight to f6 here. And I mentioned why that could be bad, because now we can just chase this knight away with e4. And let's see here. The computer recommends d5 as being best. So we could take a quick look at that. Now, why would this be a good move here? Well, white is controlling all this real estate in the center. By playing d5, you try to fight back for some control of the center, and you try and prevent white from just controlling everything here. Now, white can either capture, and it looks like you give up a pawn, but then you could play knight to f6 and not worry about the e-pawn pushing forward and chasing you away. And you would be targeting this pawn. It might be possible to eventually get that pawn back, but this would break up the strong pawn formation that white has built up here in the center. So that's why this would be a good move. Also, white could push forward here, gaining more space, which might be a good move. According to the computer, that would be best, to just push forward, gaining more space. But at some point, f6 could be played to start attacking this pawn center. All right, in the game we had knight to f6. So that's attacking this unprotected e-pawn. So here I just played knight to c3, which the computer says is best, developing a piece towards the center, controlling d5 and protecting e4 here. So my opponent finally castles, although the computer likes d6 better because that would prevent this next move, e5, which is the best move in this position because you're attacking this knight. And now where does the knight go? The knight can't move forward here or here because the c3 knight is controlling e4 and d5. If the knight moves to g4, well, then you have h3 that would chase the knight back, and then the knight would have to jump back here to h6 on this horrible square on the edge of the board. So the computer says it looks like knight to e8 is what it's saying is best here. Let's see. So my opponent did that in the game. He moved back knight to e8, which is not very good, but at least here the knight could reposition maybe back here and try and get back towards the center. Or you could push a pawn, and if it's captured, the knight could recapture. So now The best move here looks to be h4 to try and run this h-pawn up and attack this fianchettoed pawn formation here. And then, if I play h4, it looks like h5 would be best for black. But in the game, I did not play that. I played bishop to c4. So the computer says that that is also a good move. I wanted to get ready to castle, and also I developed this bishop to where it can help control the center. Attacking this d5 square, but also aiming at the king here and preventing this f-pawn from moving forward. So my opponent finally tries to start counterattacking in the center, but now they prefer this knight move here instead, which, if the knight moved here, maybe this pawn would want to push up even further at some point. But, more than likely, this knight move just gets the knight off the back rank, allows this rook to move, which is kind of trapped in. So here I played, I castled kingside, and that was an inaccuracy. White is still ahead by 0.9, but I could have stayed ahead by 1 and almost a quarter by playing queen to e2 instead, which would have been a better move. So we could take a look at that. Queen to e2 would help protect my bishop. It would cover this b2 pawn here and maybe allow this bishop on c1 to move up here and line up on the queen and prevent, if once I castle, this pawn is pinned by the queen. So it would have been better to get the queen up here, then develop my bishop, and then think about castling. So after queen to e2, what would be best? Bishop to g4, pinning this knight to the queen here, and then it looks like bishop to e3 would be good. And the only thing about that, now the bishop could capture, and I probably wouldn't want to capture with the queen because black's queen could capture my pawn on b2. So I would probably have to capture this way, which does weaken my king side, but it maybe would open up a line directly on the king here, possibly. Anyway, in the game, what did we have? I castled kingside. So now my king is a little bit safer, although there is the pin of this d pawn on my king, so that's probably not good there. But I did get my rook towards the center of the board where it can help influence the game more. So continuing on, I play an inaccuracy, and then my opponent follows it up with a mistake here. Queen to b4, and the game jumps to plus 1.64 here in white's favor. So he decided to attack my bishop, but this wastes time because now I have 3 pieces developed, plus I've castled. My opponent has 2 pieces developed and he's castled. This knight on the back rank doesn't really count as being developed because it's pretty awful there. And now, well, before we move on, let's see what the computer recommended. Knight to c6 would have been a better move, it looks like. So with that move, you could threaten to maybe jump forward and attack this bishop. That's one possibility. And it looks like now the computer would want me to play knight to a4 and attack the queen. And then we could have maybe, looks like a retreat is what the computer recommends. And then what would we do? Then we just develop our queen. So back to what happened in the game. After my opponent played queen to b4, attacking my bishop, this wastes time because I just play queen to e2. And it looks like now the computer's saying queen to d3 would have been a little bit better, but now it changed its mind. So queen to e2, it says that's best. And this move protects the pawn, protects the bishop. I've developed another piece. Now I can develop this bishop because the queen is covering the b2 pawn. And so my opponent continues with this pin, another mistake. So this move is a mistake. Let's see what he should have played here. All right. Looks like bishop to e6 would have been better. So now why is this better? Usually you don't want to put your pieces in front of your pawns and block their movement. But white has all these pieces just controlling the center of the board. This move would kind of eliminate one of the pieces controlling the center. Also, you have a bishop attacking and a queen attacking. Two attackers and only one defender. So white would have to make a decision here. The computer recommends maintaining the bishop pair, or equally as good looks to be knight to d5. Jumping forward, threatening to capture this pawn with check, attacking the queen, and now it doesn't like that. It says it would be better to capture with the bishop, so we could take a look at that. Because if the knight jumps forward, the bishop would capture the knight, then my bishop would recapture, and then knight to c6 could be played. All right, so let's see if we go back here. Now it's saying it's better to just capture there. So capture, pawn captures, and then what? Bishop to e3 here. Bishop to e3. So we've developed our bishop, our rooks are connected, and we're really controlling the center pretty good here. It looks like knight to c7 would be recommended to get this knight off the back rank there. Protect this pawn, maybe threaten to jump forward, attacking the bishop. And now the computer recommends h4 to try and start something on the king side. Okay, back to the game. I'd moved up queen to e2 to protect my bishop. My opponent makes a mistake by pinning the knight here. So I jump forward here, attacking his queen. So he has to move the queen. It looks like the best move was to move the queen to a5, but my opponent instead attacks my queen. But this gives up his bishop pair, and I'm just able to capture with my rook. And now white, according to the computer, is pretty much close to winning here with a +3 advantage. Now, why is this? Let's look at the position. So white has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces developed, and black, pretty much has 2. He's castled, so that's something. But he's not doing much, and white is just really controlling the center of the board here. And we're threatening, we're attacking the queen and threatening to capture this pawn with check. So in this position, queen to a4 is recommended, but my opponent plays queen to a5, which is still good. But this just adds more to white's advantage. So we go ahead and capture with check, which is best. And now it's almost +4. After the king moves here, we're showing +3.69 here. Now, if we play f5, it would jump up to almost a 4-point advantage. But I didn't see this move. I think I might have looked at it in the game, but thought if I push forward, he could attack here. And then if I capture, the bishop could maybe capture. So I thought it would break apart my pawn structure in the center, but it looks like that's the best way to continue, is to play f5. So let's take a look at this. f5. Now the recommendation is not to capture in the center here. So queen to c7. So we'll look at what the best moves are first. Queen to c7, then f6, and now the bishop is trapped. So that looks awful. If we capture here, computer says that's the best option. Well, now, let's see. Bishop takes f7. Ooh, that would be hard to see. Bishop takes f7. Sacrificing your bishop. You'd think you would just capture here. I mean, why not just capture like that? If the king captures, then what? Oh, then you have this move, bishop to h6. Well, let's check that out. Bishop to h6. If the king captures, now you have rook to h3. And king back to g7. Queen to e3. Threatening an attack over here. h6. Man. Would you want to try and play that? I don't know. That's probably too risky. Because if you did that, what? You think you could push the g pawn, but... Oh, man. Yeah, then they have a crazy move like this. If you capture, then what? Capture, queen to g5. Yeah, and that's awful. And then a mate to follow. Oh my gosh. So after knight to f5 check, you don't want to capture here. Let's go back further. Let's take another look at this from the beginning because it's so crazy. So I should have played, instead of that move, I should have played f5. And then how bad is it to just capture here? Well, then you have rook to h3 lining up on the king. Man, it is not looking good here. Yeah, this would be awful. It's saying you have to just give up material maybe, because you're lining up here. If the pawn moves forward, you can attack. I mean, can you sacrifice the rook and then bring the queen up? Then if that blocks, oh my gosh, yeah, it's looking really bad here. So maybe knight to f6, then you just take the knight. Queen to e1 check, you just take the queen. It's recommending bringing the bishop to h6. Well, then you just capture it. So, if they just capture in the center, something like this, well then, yes, it looks like that works. Forcing the king to capture. Then the queen jumps up here. Then we have a block. And then queen mates. So, yeah, really crazy stuff. And all this can happen when you control the center. So if we go back, by taking control of the center, you just influence the game way more than an opponent who's not fighting for control of the center. And it gives you a lot more opportunities to attack, to increase your advantage. So the game continued with, well, let's go back a little bit. I missed that opportunity to push forward and start attacking the king. So that seems to be something I need to work on, is trying to go after the king more and attack the king. So instead, I just worried about developing another piece, and I see my advantage drops here. So now the best move is queen to d8 to go up here and attack the knight, which is what I thought my opponent would play. But instead, he just developed the knight here. So now my best option is to capture the knight, which is what I did. He recaptures. And now it looks like, what, +3 advantage? So white is just ahead here. And now, I kind of lost track a little bit. I played b3, thinking, well, I don't know what this was. Maybe b3 was to prevent, when the rook moves here, to prevent the rook from attacking this pawn that's unprotected on b3. The other pawn could protect it, I guess. Anyway, what would be better? It looks like an immediate rook to c1 would be a better move. Is that the best move? Now the computer is saying bishop to b3 would be better. All right. Bishop to b3. Because if I played rook to c1, what are they like here? c5. Play c5, try to attack the center some more. If we go back, this move, bishop to b3, now will it say that's best? Now it's saying rook to c1 again, so the computer is a little unsure. Here it recommends rook to b8, targeting the bishop, because if the bishop were captured and I captured, this rook could be captured. So that could be a danger there. So after rook to b8, I would move my rook to the center. So back to the game, I played b3. And I guess this is to blunt any movement of the rook down this half-open b file. And so now we have an attack on my bishop, driving me back. So I retreat back here. And, at least I'm controlling the center a little bit, and I'm aiming at the king side. So the knight finally, repositions off the back rank. The rooks are connected here. He's threatening to maybe jump forward at some point. So now I play rook to c1, targeting this unprotected pawn. And it looks like once again I should have played f5 and started an attack there. So queen to b6, protecting the pawn. And now my best move once again is f5. But instead I make an inaccurate move, piling pressure on this pawn here. So I go after this pawn with queen to c2. White still has an advantage, but it's not as much as if I would play f5. Here the recommendation is knight to e6, which would add pressure to this pawn here. So, that's what my opponent should have played. Knight to e6 next. Let's take a look once again at this f5 move. All right, so f5, an interesting move here. You push forward, giving more room for your bishops, attacking the pawn structure around the king. It looks like the best thing to do would be to ignore that and If you're going to ignore that, why wouldn't you move this rook out of the way so your bishop could escape? Computer recommends rook at A to E8 here, lining up on the queen. Okay. Well, let's see. I don't know. I want to just take a look at, I mean, why wouldn't you do this? Now, the recommendation is queen to F2. Queen to F2. All right. At least now, if they push to F5, the bishop can escape. But queen to F2 looks to be the best move. All right, let's get back to what actually happened in the game. So queen to C2, we just pile up on this pawn. My opponent plays A5 here, which is an inaccuracy. Trying to push forward and break these pawns apart. Looks like the best thing to do would have been knight to E6, adding pressure to this right here. And then looks like queen to F2 would be best. Okay. So we protect the pawn, instead of counterattacking and making the game get a little bit crazy. If we attack over here and he attacks over here, and we'd have to give up our bishop pair, at least this way we keep our bishop pair. Now the recommendation is for F5. We capture en passant. Okay, if we capture that way, I guess saying the rook capture would be best. Okay, because if you capture this way, you add more pressure to this pawn, but you allow this possibility. Okay. Capture. Bishop captures. Knight to G5, attacking the rook. But then, what's the recommendation here? Moving up here. Then rook at A to E8, attacking our bishop. Rook to G4, attacking the knight. Knight to E6. So anyway, you get the idea. A little bit tricky here. Let's go back to what happened in the game. So I played queen to C2, attacking this pawn. My opponent pushes over here, which was an inaccuracy. He should have centralized his knight. And I go ahead and capture, although that's not best. Once again, it wants that F5 move. Capture, capture. I'm attacking his knight. Finally, his knight moves over here, and we play F5. But now that's not the best move. So it's funny, timing makes a huge difference. But we see how controlling the center so much here is really cramping my opponent's position. We're threatening to move forward and trap his bishop. So here, let's see. My opponent plays this move, A4, which is good, but I don't know. It looks like it would have been much better to capture here. And then we capture with our bishop. And now A4. So now if they play A4, I mean, I guess we could take the knight, but that would give up our bishop pair. Computer recommends B4. B4. and then rook at f to c8 to try and get rid of this rook here. So now we have, oh man, one recommendation is rook to d6 right here, going after this pawn. The other option, does that even work? Trying that, because if they capture, you could attack, capture this pawn and then attack both of their rooks. So the best move would be to go ahead and capture there. Then you can capture, then a3 to prevent my pawn from pushing forward and protecting the other one. Although now they recommend just moving down here. So let's see. b5 looks like just march that pawn forward. And now it's also recommending moving here and going after this. Rook at a to b8, so you're attacking. Rook to c6. Capture. Pawn captures. Rook to c8. And then bishop to what? f4. Huh. f4. Why would you even do that? You think you'd go back here and maybe aim for that as one possibility. But this is what they're looking for. And then of course they would capture. And then, oh, okay, now I see why. Then you pick this off and you have this outside passed pawn, which would be a huge advantage. Yeah, and it's looking bad here. So you go here, rook to a5, and white would just have a big advantage. All right, let's go back to what happened in the game. So the pawn is pushed on the a file. We capture, trade off queens. The knight centralizes a little bit better here, but still, kind of defensive. We attack with this f5 move. a4 is played. So now we ignore that and capture the knight. So now we're just ahead by +5 of material here. They capture, we capture, and white is pretty much winning, and we've still maintained control of the center by a huge amount here. So my opponent tries to get a little bit of an attack in here before the game ends. I block, but it would have been better. That wasn't the best move to play that. And now it's also saying that that would have been best. Capture, but then we could capture this way. So that's probably why my opponent did not play that. And then what? Bishop takes f8, but you're able to capture this, and rook to b8, putting pressure on that. But you can just protect with your bishop because you have the bishop pair here. Then what? You could try and attack the bishop, but the bishop could move back, and the rook cannot come into the position so much. Well, I don't know. It's a little tricky still. Rook to a8 is what they would recommend. All right. If we go back, take one more look at that. Capture there would allow this trade. So that's probably why my opponent instead played rook to a1 check. I should have blocked with this, and then what? If he captures, my king just moves to the center. So the computer says that is the best move. Then king takes, or they actually recommend the bishop capturing. I don't know about that because now you can't protect this pawn anymore. So the recommendation is capture b4. Now you can protect it. And yeah, and it's just losing. So I'll play out the final moves. We had rook to c1, capture, my bishop captures, capture there, but now I'm able to just trade off the final pieces. And the whole time we're still controlling the center more than they are. So he repositions here, trying to stop this pawn, but we can just move up and allow the pawn to press forward, covered by the bishop. And here, king to g7 would have been better. But now it's too late. My opponent is losing, so this is how the game finished out. I just start, well, he tries to go after the center pawns, but I bring my king up, and now I'm able to just start pushing my pawn forward, and he can't stop that. So this is where the game ended. My opponent resigned because he can't get to the king, or excuse me, to the pawn in time. So, if he kept moving forward, we just, push up until we promote here. So then we'd have a queen, and there'd be no way to stop that. All right, well, if you have any comments, suggestions in your comments, leave whatever comments you want if you have any. I encourage you to leave comments with feedback. What would you like to see in future videos? What do you like? What don't you like? Don't be afraid of hurting my feelings. If you think the videos are terrible, let me know, and I'll try to see what I can do to improve them. Also, I tried to start a vote chess, so you can find that video in my channel, and I put it out a few days ago, and my hope is that I'll make a move. So I played e4, and then the audience, the viewers, vote for the response. So far I had e5 and c5 as the two votes, and I'll wait a little bit longer and see if anybody else votes, but I'm hoping as the game progresses, people will vote more and we'll get more feedback. So, that could be a very interesting way to improve and learn, because you can see what the other people, what moves they're voting on. And then as I play the game, I'll try and explain, what votes for certain moves were good and what moves were bad. And then we can all learn from each other's suggestions. Anyway, before the video drags on forever, let me just thank you for watching, and I hope you have a super chess day.